Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Deconstructing Leftists. On today's program, I'm going to be dealing with a video by somebody named CJ Cornthwaite or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name, but he has a channel on here, and he's an atheist. And he has a video out where he's claiming that he's got five things in the New Testament that everybody knows contradict each other or false, that can't be proven. They can be proven to be false, and that even believers, people that are apologists, don't have any way of defending these things. They all know there's a mistake here. And so I had a challenge from somebody in the comment section to he said, I never answered it. I never was able to tell how that this man was wrong and how that the Bible was correct. And it was not the easiest one to do, because it's not that I don't have any answers for it. It wasn't that issue that wasn't easy. But it takes research to go back and try to organize these answers, because what he's saying is, in this particular video, he's claiming that the different gospels contradict each other, and that, like, they're contradictions that nobody can deny. They just are just flat out there to see. So I had to put stuff in order to harmonize the different accounts in the gospels. It's the only way I could do it. And in doing so, I can't just speak off the cuff here to be able to do it. I had to go through the different versions and lay out how they harmonize into one, how you take all the different accounts from the different gospels. And so I had to do this in a kind of a strange way. I've got all of these, I've got notes that I'm going to be reading from. Instead of just speaking it, I'm going to be reading it, because I put these notes down. And so I'll be scrolling along on my laptop, reading some of this before the. In some of them I won't have to do that, but some of them I am going to have to. So that's the reason for that. So you'll see me over here reading. That's because I had to do it this way in order to show you the real sequence of the events. So we're going to begin with number one, and this is one that I had to deal with before with another. It wasn't an atheist the last time. It was a liberal Christian. It was one who was denying that the Bible was the Word of God. And he was claiming that the account of the empty tomb, they all contradicted each other. And he said nobody can reconcile them. So we're going to start with that. And I'm going to, by mixing them all together, taking the time to go through, I'm going to do the best I can to harmonize all the stories in the order that they happened. And like I said, I already typed all this out, so I'm going to be reading from my notes. Okay, the number one thing that happened: Jesus was crucified, he was buried, and a guard of Roman soldiers was set up to make sure that nobody stole the body. It was placed at the tomb, and the tomb was secured. The first person to show up at the tomb was Mary Magdalene and some of the other women. Well, before that happened, Mary Magdalene and some of the other women had prepared spices to anoint Jesus' body. They hadn't come there yet because they were honoring the Sabbath. But they had already prepared the spices to anoint Jesus' body. But early on Sunday morning, which is the first day of the week, not the Sabbath, but the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb and finds that the stone has been taken away. She then runs to tell Peter and some of the other disciples that the Lord's body has been taken away, and she doesn't know where it is. After that, other women, including Mary, the mother of James, and Salome, along with other women who followed Jesus, came to the tomb bringing spices and perfumes, intending to anoint his body. But they found that the stone was rolled away and the tomb was empty. Next, angels were present at the tomb, and one of them sat upon the stone. One of them spoke to the women and said that Jesus had risen and was not there, telling them to tell the disciples that Jesus would meet them in Galilee. The women, trembling and astonished, fled from the tomb and said nothing to anyone because of fear. Mary Magdalene goes and tells, or after telling Peter and some of the others, because she did, what she had found, she returns to the tomb with them. She remains after they leave weeping. She looks into the tomb and sees two angels in white, and they ask why she's weeping. She then turns and sees Jesus, but did not recognize him at first. He asked why she wept and who she sought. Assuming he was a keeper of the garden, she asked if he had carried Jesus away and where he had laid him. Jesus says to her, Mary. She then turns and cries out, Rabboni, which is to say, Master. Jesus then tells her not to touch him, for he had not yet ascended to his Father and their Father, and his God and their God. The other women who had come to the tomb report these things to the 11 disciples, and their report seems to them as idle tales, and they did not believe. After these events, 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus talked with Jesus without recognizing him at first. Jesus explained how the scriptures showed that the Messiah would suffer and rise again. When invited to dine, Jesus blessed and broke bread, and they recognized him. He then disappeared from their sight. They returned to Jerusalem to tell the others. Again, I'm trying to show you that this is how I would reconcile all these things. What I do is I go in there and I look at all the different accounts, and I start trying to piece them together, much like a jury would, if they're listening to 4 different people give testimonies of something that happened. They're going to listen to all of them, and they're going to take notes, and they're going to try to reconcile them the best they can. Now, it is possible that I could have made some kind of minor mistake in something as I was bringing them all together. And if that's the case, I will look at it. It is a possibility because I'm subject to make mistakes. But no matter what it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reconcile it. I'm not looking for discrepancies or putting it under a microscope to find problems. I'm actually looking at the Bible, believing it's true to begin with, not skeptical. And I am looking at, okay, I take all of these things together. I believe they're all truthful, and I simply reconcile them the best I can to get all the facts. I'm getting some facts from this one, I'm getting some facts from that one, and I'm putting them all together. Whereas the atheists and the skeptics, what they're going to do is they're going to take all that stuff, put it under a microscope, and try to find some way to find fault in it. And so that's why I'm going to come out with a different way of looking at that. And that's why these kind of videos they put out where they're trying to prove errors like that, they're not going to work. They won't work on a real Christian, somebody who's totally sold out, because we are not skeptical. We're looking at it as a truthful testimony before we ever get there. So that's how I would do it. Now, number 2 had to do with Jesus's birth story in Matthew and Luke. And I'm going to do the same thing. I had to go through the story in both accounts, and I did the best I could to harmonize the 2 accounts. So here we go. Number 1, an angel tells Mary that she has been chosen to be the mother of the Christ child. Number 2, Mary is told that she will conceive even though she is a virgin. She hasn't known a man. The same angel tells her that her cousin Elizabeth will conceive a son in her old age. Mary visits Elizabeth, and the baby, who is John the Baptist, leaps in her womb when Mary tells her she is going to have the Christ child. A decree is then given by Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Joseph, being of the house and lineage of David, goes up from his home in Nazareth to Bethlehem with Mary, who was pledged to him in marriage and is now great with child. The journey fulfills the prophetic line that the Messiah would come from Bethlehem, the city of David. While they travel, Mary's time to give birth approaches. Joseph and Mary arrive in Bethlehem, but there's no room in the inn, so they find shelter where the animals are. While in the manger, Jesus is born. He's wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger. The birth of Christ is announced to nearby shepherds. The heavenly host appears to the shepherds, praising God and declaring that the Savior is born, who is Christ the Lord. The shepherds go to Bethlehem and find Mary, Joseph, and the newborn Jesus and glorify God for what they have seen and heard. Now, the interesting thing about this is, we have all these different scenes, of Jesus in the manger, the birth of Christ, and all that stuff. We put them out at Christmas time. The wise men were not there at this time. These were the shepherds. The wise men wouldn't come to see Jesus till he was a young child later on, but it's just something to keep in mind here. After that, Jesus is taken to the temple in Jerusalem and for purification according to the law of Moses. Simeon had been told or showed by God that he would not see death before he saw the Lord's Christ, and he sees Jesus. Simeon takes Jesus in his arms and prophesies about the Messiah's role and the sorrow that would accompany many, including Mary. He proclaims a blessing over Mary and speaks of a sword piercing her soul. Also present is the prophetess Anna, who gives thanks to God and speaks of Jesus to all who were waiting for redemption in Jerusalem. After their stay in Jerusalem, Mary and Joseph return to their home in Nazareth, where Jesus grows and increases in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Jesus is a young child, probably around 2 years old. We don't know exactly, but this is well after his birth, at least a couple of years. And he's visited by wise men from the east who followed a star to worship the Christ child. They bring him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. King Herod hears about the possibility that Jesus is the Messiah, and he plots to destroy Jesus. But an angel from God warns Joseph, and he and his family flee to Egypt. They remain there until after Herod's death. After Herod's death, an angel instructs Joseph to return to Israel, and he takes his family back to Nazareth and settles there. There is also, after this, another point that the video makes, and he claims that the Bible speaks about this taxation that required Joseph to go to Bethlehem. And he claims that because the Bible says, here's what it says. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. Now, what they're claiming is that Cyrenius was not the governor there in Syria until about 7 to 10 years after Herod was reigning. But when I looked into this, it's actually debated. It's not a fact. It's another one of those things where there's a lot of historians that are saying that, but they can't prove it. And then here's why. There are records, there are historical accounts that say that was the case, but that's not proof of anything any more than the Bible saying otherwise. And it is even a possibility that both things could be true, because it is possible that Cyrenius could have been the governor of Syria at another time and another term. And then he came back into power again. He might have been in power, left power, came back into power, something like what's happened recently with President Trump in America. It is a possibility on that too. But this does not prove anything as far as the timing of it. They claim that it's proof, but it's not proof of anything. And so, you just believe what you believe. But I'm going to take the Bible account as true, and they can believe whatever they want, but it does not prove anything. Now, number 3, last words of Jesus. And here's something that I want to make a point on. This is one where they are so sure of themselves. They've got different last words of Jesus in the different Gospels. Well, here's the problem with that. Not one of them say they are the last words of Jesus. They just say that he died after he said these things. So let's go through them, shall we? Matthew chapter 27, 46 through 50 is where one of them comes from. I'm not going to read all the entire verses, but I am going to focus on the main verse, the one that's supposed to be his last words. It says in verse 50, it says that Jesus says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And it also says that this is interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? It also says that after speaking this, that he, at some point, gave up the ghost. It doesn't say those are his last words. So, he said it. He died afterward. That's all we know. Same thing in Mark's account. And Mark's account confirms the same last words. He says basically the exact same thing, but Mark never says these are his last words either. We just know he said it and he died afterward. Luke records the final words, or what they say are the final words of Jesus, but they're not recorded as being the last words. They just says he said it. He says, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Again, we know that he said this. We know that he gave up the ghost. We don't know if those were his last words. And I would also point out he said other things too while he was on the cross. So, sorry, but that doesn't prove anything. John 19:30, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Even this one doesn't actually say it's his last words. I would say, if I had to guess, I think that's probably his last words. But since none of them actually say they're his last words, I don't know what his last words were, since they don't actually come out and say that. So again, nice try, but it doesn't prove anything. Sorry, they're not contradicting each other if it doesn't say that. We just know that he said those things. Now, how many times did Jesus cleanse the temple? That's the next one. The point that was made here is that one of the Gospels, it seems like that the order of events is different, the timing. So than in another gospel. So basically what they're saying is that it can't be right. They can't both be right unless there was actually 2 times the cleansing the temple, which wouldn't make any sense. That's not true. These gospels were not written to be absolutely perfect in chronological order. They're just telling events that happened. Just like this situation I was just talking about with so-called last words. And so it's the same event. It's the same cleansing of the temple. It didn't happen twice. It happened once. It's just that they didn't have it in absolute chronological order. That's not a mistake. They never had any purpose to do that. It wasn't written so that skeptics who would put the Bible under a microscope, couldn't make hay out of this. It was just written to tell you what happened. So, no, that does not prove anything either. Genealogy contradictions. This is an interesting one too. And this is a case where I actually did a little bit of research on it. When I started the channel, I said that if there was something I wasn't sure of, that I would look into it. I said I would do my best to find an answer to it. If I didn't know it, I'd look into it. So I did. And in this case, it talks about who was the real father of Joseph. Because the Bible, in the 2 genealogies, one of them mentions Jacob and one of them mentions Heli. Okay, according to what I could find out, and this certainly makes sense to me because both of these genealogies were written for different purposes. In the case of Jacob, Matthew had written his genealogy to present Jesus as the legal right to the throne of David and Abraham, ending with Jacob. See, the Jacob in the Old Testament was the father of Joseph. He was also the one whose name was changed to Israel. This was more about showing that Jesus was of the lineage of David and therefore rightful heir to the throne than it was saying that Jacob was his actual father, in the sense of like he is the father of Joseph here. He was just showing a connection to the Jacob of the Old Testament. That is one possibility here. Is that true? Well, it's a possibility. I know that there is a scripture in 1 Timothy 1:4, where it says, "Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying." So is that the reason? I don't really know for sure, but I do know this is not proof of anything, because both of these genealogies, they're not written the way that people are making them out. They weren't written to be exactly precise to show every single person in the genealogies. And I can tell you this for a fact. I went back years ago and I traced all the genealogies the best I could back to the Old Testament, wherever I could do it. And when I was doing it, I noticed that in some of the genealogies, names were skipped. Like the direct father's name was left out, but it went to the grandfather's name. And it would be like, I don't know, just Bob, the son of James, just to throw a couple of names out there. Well, James might not have been his actual father. It might have been his grandfather. It had something to do with, 14 generations and then 14 generations and so forth. And so it was certain names were even left out there, and it was done on purpose. There's a reason for everything that's in there like that. I don't always know exactly what the reason is, but there is a reason for it. But they were not even done perfectly that way. Those are not errors. They were done by God for some reason. So who is his real father? I don't believe it was Jacob. I actually believe it was the second choice here. Let me see if I can go back and find it again. And let's see, Joseph. Heli. Sorry for that long delay there. I'm scrolling up through my computer here, but it was Heli. That's the guy. So I believe Heli was his actual father, but I think Jacob was mentioned in order to reference the Jacob from the Old Testament. Of course, you notice again that Jacob was also the father of Joseph from the story in the Old Testament. So believe whatever you will, but it doesn't prove anything. And then finally, there is the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. And it had to do with locations. He seemed to be all fascinated with, Jesus was kind of like all over the place after that. At the time when Jesus was making his appearances, he had been given his glorified body. And the glorified body was not subject to the same kind of things that he had when he was just walking around on this earth in the fleshly body, just like us. He now had a glorified body. And he could go anywhere he wanted to, just automatically just go from one place to another. And it could be long distances apart. Matter of fact, even if you want to get down to it, when God wanted to do it, he took one of the disciples and just kind of whisked him away and brought him to a man who was sitting in a chariot reading Isaiah so he could help him interpret it. So even with the natural body, God has the ability to do that. So in this case, he's saying that, making a big deal out of it, that Jesus appeared over in this one place. And then he appeared in another place. It was a long ways away and all that. It doesn't mean anything. Jesus could walk through walls. Jesus could do all kinds of things in that glorified body. And one day, if we are faithful followers of Jesus, we'll have a glorified body. It'll never be able to be subject to sickness and death. And it'll be able to do these kind of things that you saw Jesus doing there. That does not prove anything at all. So anyway, that's the different things that he brought up that he said prove that there are problems with the Bible that even Bible scholars can't do anything about. Now, I will admit that the weakest one had to do with the genealogies, but then again, it doesn't prove anything either, because I do realize that the two genealogies, they were written for different purposes, and I do know already that certain names were left out of them. I do want to point one other thing out, too, about the genealogies, and that has to do with the guy, C.J. Cornwait, or whatever it is. The fact that he was pointing back to Adam and Eve as though they were some kind of fable, because he doesn't believe in them. Well, I do believe the story of Adam and Eve. I do believe that was the first couple. I do take it literal. I take the account of creation from Genesis to be absolutely literal. And for these people that are going around denying that, saying it wasn't an original first couple and all that kind of stuff, I would say, well, then how many people were there? How many original people were there? Were there 10? Were there 50? Were there 100? And where do you get this idea from? And then you say, oh, but let's go back even further. They claim that men evolved from some kind of lower form. Well, let's trace it all the way back to the most primitive men according to the way they believe. I don't believe in half that stuff, but let's say we were to believe in all that stuff. And you go back to the very primitive men. How many of them were there? How many men and how many women? Where'd they come from? Were there 2? Were there 10? Were there 50? Were 100? I don't know. It's a good question for me. Then let's go back to further than that. They claim that all the life came out of the sea. So how many original catfish were there? The very first ones, that came from those microscopic sea organisms. How many catfish were there? Were there 2? Were there 10? Were there 50? Were there 100? How in the world did they ever form like that? And then, they say that these sea creatures came out of the water, and then they came out and became land animals. Okay. How many catfish came out of the water and turned into a tiger? How many tigers were there to start out with? And let's trace it back again to microscopic sea organisms. How many of them were there at the beginning? 1, 10, 50, 100? I mean, and where'd they come from? The whole thing is just silly nonsense from people who have been too much into science fiction. So I do believe in the story of Adam and Eve. And I do believe that we all trace our origins back to them originally. And of course, after that, everybody was wiped out through the flood. Yes, I do believe in Noah's flood too. And there was nobody but Noah and his family and the different animals that were on the ark. 2 of the ones that were unclean, 2 of the ones that were unclean. And I believe it was 7 of the ones that were clean. And it had to do with, at the end, a lot of them were sacrificed after they came off the ark, but he had to keep 2 of every one alive. But however that was, I do believe in that literal story of Noah's Ark. And, how in the world is it all that possible? We got all these videos out here of scientists who claim that they can prove that it couldn't have happened because they couldn't have held enough food on there. They were too high in the air. If the air's too thin, all this kind of nonsense. And, we're talking about a supernatural God who could multiply 5 loaves and 2 fishes and feed 5,000 men plus women and children. We're talking about a God who could make it where a widow's barrel never ran out of food during years of a famine. We're talking about a supernatural God who could keep it where that all the children of Israel's clothes never wore out for 40 years wandering in the wilderness. God doesn't have any problem with this kind of stuff. He isn't confined to natural law. He can do anything he wants. So anyway, I had told this person that I would do the best I could to address these different things. And so that's what I'm doing on today's program. And if you're not a subscriber to my channel, I want to invite you to subscribe. And Lord willing, I'll be back soon with another Deconstructing